Alright guys, a couple of days ago I made a video about Will Beall's Justice League script that was written back in 2011. I have another one of those videos for you, and today we're going to be talking about J.J. Abrams' Lost Superman movie. Now you may be thinking, is this the J.J. Abrams Superman movie that was announced a couple of years ago, and still to this day we have no details on the project? And James Gunn even went as far out to say that his Superman movie could still happen, which is really weird, doesn't make too much sense, but we'll ignore that for now. And the answer is no, it's not that particular Superman film. This is a Superman film written by J.J. Abrams in 2002. It's very clear J.J. Abrams is a Superman fan. Now, the development for this film is not just extremely messy and all over the place. It also finds itself in the position where Warner Brothers was testing other possible superhero movies that could be made around the same time. During this time, there were, of course, discussions of Batman movies, which in 2005, we got Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. There was discussions of a Batman vs. Superman film called Asylum. People were all competing and racing to make their Superman film or their DC comic film. So when you put creatives in a position like this, no doubt there's going to be a form of production hell. The scripts are out there. You can find them. He wrote one that was given to the studio in July 2002, and then he wrote a revised one that was sent to the studio in October of 2003. This film has so many actors who auditioned for Superman, and believe it or not, this is where Henry Cavill gave his first ever audition for Superman. So, like I said, turning in his script in July 2002, J.J. Abrams' Superman Flyby was an origin story that included Krypton besieged by civil war between Jor-El and his corrupt brother Kal-El. Before Kal-El sentences Jor-El to prison, Kal-El is launched to Earth to fulfill a prophecy. Adopted by Jonathan and Martha Kent, he forms a romance with Lois Lane in the Daily Planet. However, Lois is more concerned with exposing Lex Luthor, written as a government agent obsessed with UFO phenomena. Clark reveals himself to the world as Superman, bringing Katar-Zor's son, Ty-Zor, and 3 other Kryptonians to Earth. Superman is defeated and killed, and visits Jor-El, who committed suicide on Krypton while in prison in Kryptonian heaven. Resurrected, he returns to Earth and defeats the 4 Kryptonians, while the script ends with Superman off to Krypton, leaving a cliffhanger for a sequel. The synopsis of this movie feels like your ordinary Zod comes to Earth and Superman needs to fight these rogue Kryptonians who don't respect human life. In this story, Kal-El was being sent to Earth not because, as per usual, Krypton was destroyed, but he was being sent to Earth to fulfill this 1,000 or thousands of years old prophecy. Essentially, 2 Kryptonian princes would have to fight, and the victor would have to return to Krypton to actually save Krypton from its eventual destruction, which I actually think is a really interesting story. Not really sure how many people would like it because it doesn't follow the canon storyline of Krypton always being destroyed, but to me, that idea is interesting. Ty-Zor, who at one point Joel Edgerton was being looked at to play this character, arrives at Earth, ravaging cities until he faces Superman in a battle which lays waste to Metropolis. Fighting with his Kryptonian sword, Ty-Zor outmatches Superman and leaves him knocked out. In a flashback, it would have been revealed that Krypton wasn't destroyed and its cities were full of spider tanks, robot soldiers, and civil wars. Jor-El and his wife Lara sent their son Kal-El to Earth so he can fulfill a prophecy which claims he will eventually save his homeworld from destruction. Tyzor aids his father Katazor to overthrow Jor-El. They would eventually imprison Jor-El and track down Lara so they can find out where they sent Kal-El. Unable to extract info, Ty and Kata torture Lara in front of Jor-El until an angry Tyzor grabs his father's blade and kills Lara. Katazor then sends Tyzor to Earth to eliminate Superman. This is a lot darker and honestly, in some ways, a lot more morbid of a Superman story than you see today. During Superman's time on Earth, UFO-obsessed CIA agent Dr. Lex Luthor tries to have him executed, but when the government refuses to get rid of the Man of Steel, Luthor makes an alliance with Tyzor and his Kryptonian soldiers to get Superman killed after notifying Tyzor that the Kryptonian spy who was waiting for him on Earth had been killed. Other versions had Luthor being the undercover Kryptonian spy himself. Well, one thing I will say is having Lex Luthor as a UFO obsessive mind is one thing, but a CIA agent? I don't know. I'm not feeling that too much. Maybe if the story was good enough, I could get around it. I find it really hard to see Lex Luthor being anything other than a rich genius billionaire. Once he finds Superman, Tyzor starts an immense aerial combat of Kryptonian martial arts and humiliates the Man of Steel after knocking him unconscious, asking the citizens of Metropolis if they still love Superman. However, as this happens, Lois Lane starts to drown inside a water tank on the Kelvin Observatory. There would be a flashback sequence that would play after this, but Superman would eventually regain his consciousness, but Tyzor leads him into a trap, where he must choose to either die from kryptonite poisoning at the hands of Luthor, or save Lois from drowning. Evidently, Superman sacrifices himself to save Lois, leading Tyzor to announce Superman's death to the inhabitants of Earth, and that Earth will be destroyed. Jor-El feels Kal-El's death and kills himself to meet him at Kryptonian heaven and convince him to return to Earth to fulfill the prophecy which will end the Kryptonian Civil War. Weird. I don't know. J.J. Abrams was getting a little too lost in this scenario, and pun intended 100%, but this just feels a little too strange. Maybe it would work better on screen, but reading it, I'm not really liking that. Superman is brought back to life and Katazor warns Tyzor that Kal-El hasn't been killed. Sparing a lot of details here that would 100% be in the script, Superman and Tyzor have a massive battle around the city. Defeated on the roof of a Metropolis museum, Tyzor is offered mercy by a reluctant Superman, but he rejects his offer and tries to kill him with a Kryptonian blade. Superman avoids Tyzor's attack and flips him into the building's skylight, shattering it and falling into a kryptonite stalagmite, fatally injuring Tyzor. As he lays in agony, a dying Tyzor gets reprimanded by Lex Luthor, on whom Tyzor performs some kind of unknown transfer before he dies, allowing Superman to finally avenge his mother and all those Tyzor mercilessly killed. So Tyzor never truly dies. He put his essence in Lex Luthor, I assume. Very strange. Really interesting, and I say that loosely because it could have been interesting, but it could have also just been interesting weird. The fact that J.J. Abrams was using a lot of religious aspects and not so much of the idea that Superman is a god. It's not about that. It's about these ideas of prophecies and afterlives and soul transfers. I don't know how I feel about that stuff. I'm not sure how it would translate in film. So with a very interesting Superman film that features somebody else who's taking the role of General Zod's place. Here is what the production looked like for the film, and like I said, not pretty. Brett Ratner was set to direct this project in September of 2002. He's known for so many things director and producer-wise. His name has been attached to all three of the Rush Hour films, Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio, but it's also been attached to movies like Tower Heist, X-Men The Last Stand, Hercules. He's got some hits and he's got some misses. With filming starting somewhere in late 2003, Ratner approached Josh Hartnett and Jude Law as Superman, but conceded that finding a famous actor for the title role had proven difficult because of contractual obligations to appear in sequels. He's even stated no star wants to sign to that, but as much as I've told Jude and Josh my vision for the movie, I've warned them of the consequences of being Superman. They'll live this character for 10 years because I'm telling one story over 3 movies and plan to direct all 3 if the first is as successful as everyone suspects. Hartnett was offered $100 million for a 3-picture deal, but turned down the offer. Although Superman Flyby was being met with a budget exceeding $200 million, not including money spent on Superman Reborn, Superman Lives, and Batman vs. Superman, the studio was still adamant for a summer 2004 release date. It's very interesting when you look at this because it seems that they still think they can make multiple Batmans and Supermans in different movies. Like at this point, they were clearly willing on making a Superman movie and a Batman movie that don't coexist with one another. It's even what they've been doing today. It's what they did back then. Batman Begins from Nolan and Bryan Singer's Superman had no correlation with one another. Neither of them were connected in the same universe. And clearly, they were willing to do a Superman trilogy with J.J. Abrams' script and a Batman vs. Superman movie back in 2004 without batting an eye. I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. Christopher Walken was in negotiations for Perry White, while Ratner expressed an interest in casting Anthony Hopkins as Jor-El and Ralph Fiennes as Lex Luthor. Christopher Walken as Perry White, I'm not too high on. Anthony Hopkins as Jor-El, I don't really feel too high on that one either. But Ralph Fiennes as Lex Luthor, that's not bad. I see Ralph Fiennes more of a Alfred type of a figure, but maybe now 20 years ago, he could have fit that Lex Luthor role. Christopher Reeve was to be a project consultant, citing Tom Welling, who portrayed the teenage Clark Kent in Smallville, as an ideal candidate. In addition, Paul Walker was offered the role, while Ashton Kutcher screen tested and Brendan Fraser and Matt Bomer auditioned. Kutcher decided not to accept the role, citing rescheduling conflicts with That 70s Show and The Superman Curse, as well as typecasting. Jerry O'Connell expressed interest for the role, while David Boreanaz auditioned, but dropped out due to, once again, scheduling conflicts with Angel. Victor Webster did an entire screen test that included wardrobe as both Clark Kent and Superman, while James Marsden met with director Brett Ratner. Joel Edgerton, who turned down the chance to audition as Superman, auditioned for Ty-Zor before Ratner dropped out of the project in 2003, blaming casting difficulties and violent disagreements with John Peters. Mick G, or also known as Joseph McGinty, who is known for his work on movies like Charlie's Angels or Terminator Salvation, some of his biggest, he took the helm of director, while Brendan Fraser expressed interest but had fears of typecasting. And if you go on Google today and type in Brendan Fraser Superman, there are a lot of interviews and articles where he actually talks about the potential he had to play Superman at one point. Selma Blair was also in talks for Lois Lane. McGinty approached Shia LaBeouf for Jimmy Olsen with an interest to cast an unknown for Superman. Scarlett Johansson and Sophia Bush as Lois Lane, and Johnny Depp and Robert Downey Jr. for Lex Luthor. Young Shia LaBeouf for Jimmy Olsen, that would have 100% worked. I'm taking Sophia Bush all day. Sophia Bush is a woman who could 100% play so many different characters out there. I would have much rather have seen her as Lois over Scarlett Johansson, but even then, I think there are much cooler DC characters you could actually give to Sophia Bush instead. Johnny Depp and Robert Downey Jr., if you forced me to choose between the two of them for Lex, I'm gonna have to go Robert Downey Jr., but if I had it my way, neither of those guys would even be a consideration for Lex Luthor. I know there's a lot of people who talk about how Robert Downey would be amazing as Lex Luthor. I don't think it would be terrible in any way, but I think there are far better options you could choose from. McGinty also commissioned Josh Schwartz to rewrite the Abrams script. He wanted to shoot in Canada, which would have cost $25 million more than Warner Brothers' preferred Australian location. McGinty also shot test footage with several candidates, including Jason Behr, Jared Padalecki, Michael Cassidy, and there you go, Henry Cavill. And here's even a photo from June 17th of 2004 of Henry Cavill's screen test as Superman. McG opted to shoot in New York City and Canada, but Warner Brothers wanted Sydney, Australia. McG felt it was inappropriate to try and capture the heart of America on another continent. He later admitted it was his fear of flying. Abrams lobbied for the chance to direct his script, but Warner Brothers replaced McG with Bryan Singer in 2004, resulting in Superman Returns. That, my friends, was a lot of information, a little messy, and way too much back and forth. Way too many actors and actresses in negotiations in which negotiations never moved forward anywhere. The only person that seems was directly attached to this project, and it doesn't seem to have really changed, was Joel Edgerton as Ty-Zor. A lot of 90s DC movies and early 2000s DC movies were not that good. They had a poor stretch of 15 years of very poor movies, and I don't know how much better this Superman movie would have actually turned out, just because of all the complications that Warner Brothers still seem to have with their creatives back in those days. At least this movie would have had a different flavor than what Bryan Singer gave us, but once again, we still got no guarantee it would have worked out well. The best thing to have come from this movie isn't even the movie itself, it's the pre-screenings, it's the testing of actors. We got Henry Cavill for this, and 100% Zack Snyder, Christopher Nolan, the talent directors, they all sat down, they saw Henry Cavill's tape, and knew that was their Superman. But as for this movie, let's just say it was made. With the way Warner Brothers operates their company, the differences in creative and studio visions, this movie probably would not have gotten sequelized, and we would have been waiting until 2013 for Man of Steel anyways. But there you go, guys. That is Superman Flyby, written by J.J. Abrams, with so many other directors, actors, and producers attached to the project. Once again, if you want more details on the full story, the script is really easy to find. So let me know in the comments down below if this would have been an interesting story you would have liked to see in film, or let me know if you straight up didn't like it. And maybe we'll find another one of these canceled DC film projects that we can dive into more details on. But until then, everyone, I will talk to you all very soon.